Welcome to UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Join us as we delve into the world's most pressing issues and learn how the people inside work toward a better future for everyone around the world.
Coming up on UN Insider.
UNRWA is the backbone of our humanitarian response in Gaza. I appeal to all member states to guarantee the continuity of UNRWA's life-saving work.
The UN tries to keep aid operations running in Gaza as it investigates disturbing allegations implicating staffers in the attacks on Israel.
I cannot overstress the severity of the situation in Haiti, where multiple protracted crises have reached a critical point.
Is help on the way for Haiti? An update on efforts to send a multinational force to the Caribbean nation. Navigating global challenges on a path to a more sustainable future. A conversation with one of the leaders of the UN's development program. Next.
The desperate effort to get more aid into Gaza now faces more uncertainty. Several nations suspended funding for the UN's relief agency inside the Palestinian territory after several UNRWA workers were accused of being involved in the October 7th attacks on Israel. Those workers have been fired and the UN is launching investigations. But UNRWA funding could run out in a matter of days. China's ambassador to the UN says the allegations should not distract from the diplomatic effort to reach a ceasefire and address humanitarian needs.
These individual cases, while it's important to have for the investigations, should not deny the fact that UNRWA is a humanitarian agency and UNRWA is providing a humanitarian lifeline for the Palestinians, and UNRWA's continuing functioning is extremely important there.
Xu Dejia is monitoring developments inside the halls of the UN. Dejia.
Yes, Elaine. This week, one UN institution took the center stage, UNRWA. UNRWA is the abbreviation for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. Israeli government has been accusing UNRWA and its staff being anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, sheltering extremists for quite a long time. But on the International Holocaust Remembrance Day this year, UNRWA announced that it has fired 12 staff for alleged ties to October 7th attack on Israel.
The Secretary General has been briefed by the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, regarding extremely serious allegations which implicate several UNRWA staff members in the terror attacks of October 7th in Israel. The Secretary General is horrified by this news and asked Mr. Lazzarini to investigate this matter swiftly and to ensure that any UNRWA employee shown to have participated or abetted in what transpired on October 7th or in any other criminal activity be terminated immediately and referred for potential criminal prosecution. An urgent and comprehensive independent review of UNRWA will be conducted.
Of course, during his International Holocaust Remembrance Day speech, Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, fiercely attacked UNRWA and the UN.
How symbolic is it that on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, it was exposed that UNRWA employees took part in the massacre? The UN is not only weaponized to delegitimize our existence, but also to physically exterminate us.
Now, to give you some background information, UNRWA, established by General Assembly Resolution in 1949, provides assistance and protection for registered Palestine refugees, including education, healthcare, relief and social services, camp infrastructure and improvement, microfinance and emergency assistance, even during a conflict like what we saw. UNRWA is funded almost entirely by voluntary contributions from UN member states. And in Gaza, 13,000 UNRWA staff help over 2 million people with humanitarian aids. Nevertheless, dozens of countries, including US, UK, suspended their funding following this incident.
We need to see fundamental changes before we can resume providing funding directly to UNRWA. And as you know, we shouldn't let that cloud the great work that UNRWA does. UNRWA has provided essential humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people, and UNRWA is the only organization on the ground that has the capacity to continue to provide that assistance. And their personnel have done extraordinary work. They've literally saved thousands of lives. And it's unfortunate that this information has raised some doubts about UNRWA.
What changes can the Secretary General see in this very special, in this very institution that he might brought up?
As far as the mandate is concerned, it is a General Assembly mandate, right? For its work methods, UNRWA, like any other part of the UN organization, is always willing and open to improving the way it does its work, right? Making it more efficient, doing it better. And, you know, it's one of the reasons I think Mr. Lazzarini will be setting up this independent review of UNRWA and how it works.
The Israeli ambassador was criticizing UNRWA. Not only the U.S. ambassador, but almost everyone agrees the vital role UNRWA played in humanitarian delivery in Gaza.
But it's very critical that we recognize the central role that UNRWA plays in the Gaza Strip in the delivery of humanitarian aid, and prior, of course, to the conflicts, when schools were open or the clinics were open or other facilities run by the agency, all those were services in support of the civilian population.
UNRWA said that if this situation continues, it will most likely shut down its operation by the end of February, which means only 4 weeks away. UN Secretary General Guterres then had a meeting with major donors of UNRWA this Tuesday. This meeting seems more like a communication. So, the outcome? What's the response from the top donors? What they want?
Well, I mean, listen, it was a chance for donors to interact actively and constructively with the Secretary General. He answered the questions. He laid out what we're doing, which is basically what I've been telling you. I think the important thing is not whatever they said in the meeting. The important thing is we'll see what happens in terms of their decisions.
We'll have to wait and see how many countries will change their mind supporting UNRWA, which ultimately means supporting Gaza people, and resume their funding to this vital institution. Elaine.
Shudaja, thanks. A new draft resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza is expected in the coming days. It follows a ruling from the International Court of Justice that calls on Israel to do all it can to prevent death, destruction, and acts of genocide in Gaza. Jody Jacobs has the details.
Algeria, the only Arab country represented at the United Nations Security Council, says it's preparing to present a draft resolution that calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The country's permanent representative told the Council that this call will be in line with the measures mentioned in the decision by the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. He says that the Council must insist that Israel implements all the measures as outlined by the court.
It is crucial to achieve a ceasefire immediately. Those that oppose that ceasefire must ask questions of their conscience and think about how human they really are. What is happening in Gaza, such as atrocities, cannot be accepted by our humanity and our sense of what humanity means. A lack of a ceasefire, its absence, means that we accept the following: 250 people will be killed every day.
But the United States says conditions in Gaza do not allow for a ceasefire at this stage, an indication perhaps that the U.S. will likely oppose such a call in the Council.
It has not made any finding that this preliminary phase of the proceedings that Israel committed genocide or otherwise violated the Genocide Convention. And indeed, the United States continues to believe that such allegations are unfounded. And that rather than try and will a ceasefire into existence when the conditions to sustain it, unfortunately, don't exist. We must instead work toward a durable solution to this conflict through the hard work of on-the-ground, relentless diplomacy.
The Palestinian permanent observer to the UN, Riyad Mansour, at another meeting on Palestine here at the UN headquarters, said that once a ceasefire is accomplished, they will call for full membership at the United Nations and then call on the General Assembly to convene an international peace conference to achieve a two-state solution. Israel says it remains committed to mitigating civilian harm in Gaza and will continue to facilitate humanitarian aid according to international law. It says it is confident that South Africa's claim of genocide will be rejected by the ICJ at the next phase of court proceedings. Meanwhile, South Africa, which led the charge at the ICJ, insists that the Security Council must immediately outline measures that it will take to enforce the court's ruling. Should this fail, South Africa says it will approach the General Assembly, which has previously voted in favor of a ceasefire. Jody Jacobs, CGTN, New York.
The conflict in Gaza was among the topics on the agenda as the president of the UN General Assembly traveled to China this week. Dennis Francis met with Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Beijing. They also discussed improving the multilateral system and the push for sustainable development.
For months, gangs have controlled large parts of Haiti. Last year, the UN approved a plan to send a multinational force led by Kenya to help Haitian police restore calm. Diplomats here at UN headquarters recently received an update on the situation.
Haiti remains plagued by mounting scale of violence due to an unprecedented surge in kidnappings, rapes, and other crimes committed by armed gangs that increasingly affect the livelihoods of people and undermine humanitarian activities. I cannot overstress the severity of the situation in Haiti, where multiple protracted crises have reached a critical point.
Kenya's President William Ruto believes the way could soon be clear for forces to deploy to Haiti. Ruto says his country is waiting on a formal request from Haiti to satisfy legal concerns raised by a court in Nairobi.
Coming up.
We know that China has reduced poverty, extreme poverty, by lifting 770 million people out of poverty.
UN Insider.
Eradicating poverty, reducing inequality, and fostering sustainable development around the world. Just some of the goals for the UN's development program. UNDP works in 170 countries and regions around the globe. I sat down with Undersecretary General and UNDP Associate Administrator Haoliang Xu. We are just over the midpoint to 2030 and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In your recent role now as Associate Administrator, which of the 17 do you see as UNDP's priorities or that need more urgent attention?
So for UNDP, our focus is really on issues that are important, for individuals and for the country to achieve a level of development that secures the well-being of current generation, but also provides possibilities for the well-being of future generations. The SDG agenda, the Global 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, is a universal agenda. And it depends on the quality of governance, poverty reduction, gender equality, environmental security for future generations, health, environment for the current generation, and so forth, climate change. All depends on how effective governance is.
I want to ask you about some stark numbers from UNDP. 1.2 billion people live in conflict-affected areas. 100 million plus have been forcibly displaced. And in 2022, 300 million experienced acute hunger. So you add to that a struggling global economy, the hottest year on record in 2023. What more needs to happen to overcome these challenges? Do you have an optimistic viewpoint?
So I think Agenda 2030 remains our best hope. In 2023, September, we had the SDG Summit, right, which showed that progress against the 2030 agenda targets are really lagging behind. But the summit also affirmed the international community's commitment to double down on their efforts to catch up. Right? So here, the challenge for developing countries is let's say, technology. Right? In the time of innovation and very fast development, digital technology and so forth, right? So developing countries are asking to have the right technology, right, for their development. Secondly, they're asking for financing, right, so that they have the fiscal space, to support their development aspirations. And thirdly, they're asking for capacity, right. So technology, financing, capacity, I think is what we need to do more to provide, so that the developing countries are enabled to achieve the goals that are set out in the 2030 agenda.
China has already achieved 2 of the Sustainable Development Goals, no poverty and quality education. What are some of the things that other countries can take from that and learn?
China has achieved a lot over the last 40 years. We know that China has reduced poverty, extreme poverty, by lifting 770 million people out of poverty, for example, as you mentioned. I think the key lessons learned, in my view, from the Chinese experience is that it is a process of policy innovation, I would say, because the Chinese experience, I would say, has no precedent, right? Because China is big, right, and its starting point is relatively low, and there were no ready-made, experience that China can copy from, right? So I think China, went through more than 40 years of reform lessons. So I think these are would be the key lessons. So have a very clear goal, but that has national consensus, right? And then always, adjust the approach as needed, but not, forget about the strategic objective.
China also has its Belt and Road and Global Development Initiative, partnering with other countries to help them build and grow. What kind of impact has that had on its SDG goals as well?
Chinese, development, has been sort of symbolized, let's say, by several indicators. I would say one is the increase of the size of the economy, certainly, right? The other is the increase in the standard of living of the Chinese population, and also the building up of the different systems that are necessary for socio-economic development. But the other indicator, I would say, is, in my view, the desire of the Chinese government also to contribute, right, to the international development agenda. Right? And China has been a long provider of South-South cooperation, along with many other developing countries. Right? And so I think, so the Belt and Road Initiative, which I consider as an investment initiative, right, in the areas of infrastructure in particular, but also a global development initiative, which tries to align, its objectives with the 2030 agenda and the SDG, objectives. So I think for all this initiative, the Secretary General of the United Nations certainly has expressed his welcome and support for these initiatives. We are seeing the highest level of conflict since World War II.
UN Insider.
The UN Development Program has a wide-ranging mission that extends across the globe. Here is part 2 of my discussion with Under-Secretary General and UNDP Associate Administrator Haoliang Xu. Everywhere you look now, the headlines are talking about different conflicts around the world. Can you tell us more about the UNDP's work currently in conflict zones like Ukraine, parts of Africa? Sudan is a hot spot right now, and of course Gaza.
And there's we're seeing the highest level of conflict since World War II, unfortunately. In 2022, the statistics say that there are 55, active conflicts. Okay, many of them are classified as wars, right? So we really are seeing a quite, challenging world. But as I said, we needed to really look at the root causes of this, right? There are many reasons that led to this situation. There are, lack of development, right? Disillusionment of young people who don't see hopes, right, for their future. So they are easily influenced and recruited, by extremist forces sometimes, right? And there are situations where when the government cannot provide for its population, right, alternative forms of influence, comes in, right, and to take the space of the government. And the failures of all this development, okay, that are the root cause of these conflicts, really reflect the failures of governance in many cases, right? That is a government, and the governance system really must deliver to the aspirations of the people, right? So we are talking about fulfillment of people's rights, right, in different areas, socio-economic, political, and cultural rights, and so forth, right? That is really the ultimate solution to what we see in the world.
It seems like we are in a very fractured world right now. That all being said, how important is multilateralism at this moment?
I would say multilateralism is more important than ever, right? And a lot of issues, all the issues we've been talking about, are international, right? And even development challenges go beyond national borders, right? Talking about climate change, for example, biodiversity, issues, water resource management, cross-boundary water resource management, right? To resolution of conflicts that will require international cooperation, right? And nowadays the development of digital technology, governance of artificial intelligence systems, and so forth. All these issues require international collaborations. Without effective multilateral collaboration and discussion and finding solutions, I don't think we can, easily resolve any of these issues.
We know that the United Nations work with refugees goes very deep. But I want to ask you about the countries that take in and support these refugees. UNDP has a lot of work in helping host countries. Can you tell us more about the work that's being done right now as we see so many people leaving these conflict zones, as you mentioned. We're seeing climate disasters as well.
The United Nations, as a development organization, is working very closely with the sister agencies such as UNHCR and others, and with governments working to find solutions, both in their home countries of origin, right, to improve the conditions of development, improve the conditions for their eventual return, right, of refugees and displaced populations, by working on rule of law, human rights, right, and socioeconomic opportunities, development opportunities. But also working with the host countries and host communities, so that the host communities are more capable of developing their own capacity, right, to support the hosting arrangement for refugee or displaced people in the host communities, and also help develop the capacities of displaced people so that they're less dependent on humanitarian support and can be more effective participants in local economies.
Mr. Xu, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN insider.